We'll talk about giving up guilt and what white-led arts organizations can do to advance equity within classical music. I'm talking with Seattle's Classical King FM CEO, Brenda Barnes, right now, here on Unmute the Voices. Brenda, I have to admit that I feel a little nervous hosting you on this show because I'm welcoming you into this studio, which you're the CEO of.
But I'm not the star of the station. That's the thing. You know, when you're the CEO, the thing that you know are the people listeners have relationships are the announcers. And it's not you, the person who kind of is in the background and sits behind the desk. So really the station, from the listener point of view, it's not my station. It's your station and Dave Beck's station and Brad and Maggie, et cetera, et cetera. That's the personification of the station. It's not me.
Okay. Fair. And I understand this being a CEO myself of my own organization, that you're always behind the scenes. I think it's important for our listeners to know why, first, is Unmute the Voices an important initiative, an important program for King FM.
About a year before the pandemic, a little bit more than that, we started a strategic planning process at the station to figure out a 5-year strategic plan. And it started with interviewing people in the community. And we wanted to have a diverse group of people in terms of age, ethnicity, et cetera. And when we did those 140 interviews, one of the things that we heard from almost everyone is the arts are perceived as elitist, and they're not doing enough to make classical music accessible. So one of the things we heard from the vast majority of the people we talked to. So that was very much always on the agenda for us. And then the pandemic happened and the protests happened, and we felt that we needed to move even faster to create change in the organization. So before the strategic plan was finalized, I remember calling you and saying, Quentin, what should we be doing right now? You know, what steps should we be taking? And you said you need an artist scholar in residence that could really help you develop a show and help guide the efforts of King FM as it embarks on this journey. And it was one of several ideas you mentioned. Yeah. And after we talked, I thought about it for a day or two, and then I sent you a note and I said, Quentin, I think this is a great idea, and I think you should be our artist scholar in residence. Is this something you'd be interested to take on? And fortunately for me, you said yes right away.
I gotta admit, though, I have no radio experience. And so when you asked me to come and join this organization, I was just completely shocked. And I'm still kind of shocked some days when I'm here recording the show because I'm like, wow, I now work in radio. It's kind of crazy. But the mission of making classical music accessible for all people is really what resonated with me. What sort of things are you as CEO anticipating or hoping that listeners will take away from learning about the new initiatives here at King FM and or about Unmute the Voices?
You know, number one, a lot of great music has been suppressed over 400 years because of racism, sexism, structural racism, and history. It's an interesting thing because one of the things we also started to do early on, in addition to asking you to come aboard and you creating Unmute the Voices, is we started playing a piece every hour by a woman or a composer of color. And it was really interesting. After we'd done it for about 3 months, and all these pieces had appeared on the station that none of us had ever heard, even though almost all of us have multiple degrees in music. We were in a staff meeting, and Sean McLean, our evening host, said, "I'm so embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I've studied music my whole life. I've been involved in music my whole life. I'm a pianist. I'm a composer. I studied in Paris. And I'm hearing every single day, every single hour on the station, music that I had no idea even existed. I'm so embarrassed that this is the case in our field." And it was a really powerful moment for all of us. And then all of us said, we all feel embarrassed. We really do. And we should feel embarrassed. So what I really want to do most of all is make certain that all of us really know this music and know that there's really good music that we just haven't heard, hasn't been performed in the concert halls, hasn't been published necessarily. But it's really great music, and we should know it, and it should be a part of our, of our station in the way Beethoven and Mozart and Bach and Beethoven are part of our station.
And what has the response been from the public in regards to these new initiatives that you've made here at King?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. There have been negative reactions, but it's been really very few. And for the most part, we're getting people saying, I love hearing these pieces I've never heard before. I love exploring more of classical music. I love the new discoveries. I love that you're opening up the doors and that you're showing me a side of classical music that I never knew existed. So we get those emails and calls pretty frequently. And in fact, we got one just earlier today about Unmute the Voices from someone who heard it for the first time and was talking about how great it was and how much they learned by listening to it.
Do you hope that other classical radio stations here in the country will follow suit and create these types of opportunities for people in the community?
Absolutely. If we can't really do the work well if all of us don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's really important that all of us say we have a really important and great opportunity here to open the doors wide of classical music to a lot more people, and for people to be able to see themselves in classical music in a way they haven't always been able to see themselves. So we all need to do this work, and it's very important that all classical stations do it.
So if all of the classical music radio stations begin to do this work of including more women composers, more composers and performers of color on their music programming, what do you predict will happen within just the classical music community?
Well, one thing that is our goal at the station is in our strategic framework, we really have one goal, and that is for the demographics of our audience to look like the demographics of the community, because we figure if real equity exists, that's what our audience should look like. So what I would love to see is for all classical stations to be able to mirror their communities in terms of what the audience looks like. So that opens the world of classical music to many more people. It also will help all of the classical sector look more diverse, ultimately. But I also have to say that the most important point where we need equity is music education. And that's why I so appreciate the work you're doing with Key to Change, trying to shift that, because that's where it starts. If we have equity in music education, then we're going to have more diversity in classical radio, in symphony orchestras, in the recording industry, et cetera. So it really all starts there.
So do you predict also that chamber music societies, symphony orchestras, as well as opera companies, that they will start to look at their programming, their artist rosters, the members of their, musical communities in a more equitable way?
Absolutely. And I think many of them are. But there's a barrier that they have that is a little bit tougher to get around, and that is ticket price isn't inexpensive to go to the symphony, if you to go to the Chamber Music Society. And they can't even with the ticket prices they have, they can't solve all of the revenue problems of the organization. They need philanthropy on top of that. So since we in this country don't have as much government support for the arts, it means that organizations are looking for ticket sales and for philanthropy to pay the cost of the organization, which creates a barrier. So the nice thing about radio, and why it's so important for radio stations to really do this work right now, is that we don't have a price of entry. You can listen to our station anywhere you want, anytime you want, for free. Therefore, if we can build a more diverse audience as they're doing their work on the performing arts side, we can hopefully funnel some of these people into concert halls, give them opportunities to deepen their appreciation by going to a concert, and really build a much more diverse classical ecosystem across the board. That's my hope.
So what you're doing here, I feel, can be very transferable to any industry. So what sort of advice would you give to a white-led organization that is struggling or trying to figure out ways and how they can become more equitable? What sort of advice can you give to them?
Well, I don't know if I have advice, but I can say that my journey really started with recognizing that and being able to say the words, I am a racist, because I've been
wait a minute.
I've been brought up in a racist society, and it's been programmed into all of us. So number one, I had to say that to myself, and I hated saying it. I still don't love saying it, but you have to say it. You have to say the words out loud, and you have to internalize that. And then once you've done that, then you can start listening and learning.
Okay, but a lot of white people won't do that. Why?
I think none of us, I think there are, to really overgeneralize, there are probably kind of two major groups. They're the people who don't want to be a racist. They really, really don't want to. They think of it as something that's bad, and they don't want it associated with them. Mm-hmm. Then, highly unfortunately, we have the people who are proud to be racist. Mm-hmm. And that, obviously is extremely disturbing, at least to me, and to everyone else. And unfortunately, the people who don't want to be racist, don't want to be associated with the people who are proud to be racist, understandably. And they're two very different things. So what I had to do, for me growing up in the South and knowing about the KKK, for me, racist meant the KKK. Mm-hmm. So for me, I had to go through that process of saying, if I say I'm a racist, it doesn't mean I'm a KKK member. What it means is that we're all programmed by the society in which we inhabit. And if it's a racist structure, then we're ingesting all of those, all of that racism into ourselves, and therefore we have to say that we're racist in order to really look at the way we're programmed. So if I'm programmed a certain way by the society, then in order to really be able to pull even further away from those people who are proud to be racist, I need to really look at myself, look at my beliefs, look at my attitudes, look at my behaviors, look at my actions, and say, am I demonstrating that I'm a person who wants to move further away from racism. And when I did that in the wake of the George Floyd protests, I had to say to myself, what have you done in your professional life that says you're not a racist? And guess what? There were a few little things here and there, but, by and large, it was, I haven't taken a stand in the way that I need to take a stand. This is a really serious problem, and I'm not tackling it. Why am I not tackling it? Why are we not all tackling it? So that was really sort of the wake-up call for me. Wow. And to say, and I've just heard in all these interviews we're doing in strategic planning, that this is the most important thing we need to do, is be less elitist and more accessible. So we don't need to wait till we finish the strategic plan. We need to start right now. And it's time to listen and learn and dive into this and figure out what steps can we start taking right now to change it. And then we have to have a sustained commitment to continuing it.
Do you feel like you've lost anything as a white woman or a white woman executive by making these announcements?
God, no, I've gained.
What have you gained?
I've gained an incredible relationship with someone named Quentin Morris. Honestly, that's been life-changing because I feel like our partnership has really helped transform the station, and that's powerful. And I've learned a ton from you, and I've learned a ton from reading books, and I've learned a lot from, talking to friends and family members. I have a son, an adopted son who's Latino. We'd never talked about race. We've had talks about race now. I have another son who's African American. We've never talked about race, but guess what? Now we have. And now they know that I'm someone they can talk to about it. So I found in my professional life and my personal life, it's been nothing but a plus.
Wow. So then what do you say to those white individuals who feel like by admitting I'm a racist, that they're going to lose something? They're going to lose their privilege, or they're going to lose their jobs or their families. What do you say to those people?
You won't lose anything. I mean, you may lose family members. You may have challenging relationships with family members.
Who are also racist?
Exactly. Who are proud to be racist. I have some of that, in my husband's family. But, the bottom line is, are you going to stand for truth and what's right, or are you not going to stand for it? I mean, we're seeing that play out in Ukraine and Russia right now. We can stand for what's right, or we can stay silent and let horrible things happen. I would rather be on the side of standing for what's right.
Wow. That's powerful. I mean, I can only name a handful of white people who have ever done that. And that's powerful. And to hear you say that you gained more meaningful relationships and were able to look at your career and even look at your own personal relationships from a real honest, authentic lens, I think is very powerful. And I hope that can serve as an inspiration for other people who might also be afraid. I guess my follow-up question to that is, what about those white people who don't have a Quinton Morris, who don't have a close relationship with someone who is Black, or they don't have an adopted son who's Latino or African American? What sort of things would you say to them?
Number one of the things that you can do right away is read books. There are some really great books that can help get you started along the journey of understanding. If you don't have a person, there's plenty of people who have written really great books around all of this subject matter. And I have read a bunch of books, and it actually was very helpful to me too. I think part of it too is just giving up the guilt around all of it. Guilt doesn't actually help you accomplish anything. A lot of times it holds you back. It's, you know, guilt and fear of doing something wrong can hold you back from doing something right. And I think that's part of it too. And that's where if you can find opportunities to meet people, listen to people, really, you can't understand it from having walked in their shoes, but you can at least understand intellectually the challenge. We had a situation at the station a number of months ago where someone had gotten together with another employee who was no longer part of the station, and that person had suggested to them that they got their job because they were a person of color. And the person came to me and told me what had happened, ultimately. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely untrue. But it really stuck in the person's head. It's like it's a bad seed, and it gets planted, and then it starts to grow. And no matter what you say, it's problematic.
Right.
So we have a diversity task force at the station that meets, that's just started meeting, and will meet monthly to give people of color a safe space to be able to talk about, anything that they're experiencing, and also to make recommendations to me about how we need to change the culture of the organization.
Right.
And this person brought up that situation again. And we talked about it, in that group. And I just said, would you be willing to talk about it at a staff meeting? Because I think we all need to understand how damaging this is, how insidious this kind of racism is, how horrible it is, and how much it's affected you, and how you can't get it out of your head. So that happened, and it was really an incredible meeting. And everyone, you could tell people were going, how could someone so talented even think that that's true? But again, you're kind of programmed and trained that this is the kind of stuff that I've come to expect. And so when someone says it, I just sort of automatically believe it. But it was a really powerful staff meeting where we could all really talk about this, and we could really, hear and feel the pain that this person experienced, and also recognize how unfair and horrible it is, and to be able to say, this should never have happened to you. And that's the kind of thing that can be powerful and really help bring us together.
Mm-hmm. And what I also hear there is you, as the leader here at King FM, creating a psychologically safe environment for this person to be able to come to you and talk to you about that. But in the workplace, a lot of employers are just not psychologically safe for employees when these sorts of issues come about. What sort of advice would you give to another CEO of a company in creating a space that is psychologically safe for all employees there?
The bottom line is it's very rare that the CEO is going to feel like a psychologically safe space to anyone. Because, when you're the boss, people are going to be afraid that they'll be perceived as complaining, or that somehow they're going to be tainted by bringing something up. So I think actually the most important thing to do is to create avenues for people outside the CEO office where they can raise concerns in a place that feels safe. So that's why our diversity group is a safe space, and it includes people of color, LGBTQI+, and the group can expand. They have autonomy. So I attended the first meeting, but I won't attend any of the other meetings. So it's a safe space where they can talk. The HR person should also be another safe space in the organization where people feel they can go. So there need to be a variety of safe spaces. so that if something happens, people feel like there's someone that they can go to who will bring that information to the people who can create change and who can handle it and deal with it.
Wow. That's powerful. That's really powerful. And it sounds like King FM has just went through this very transformational kind of couple of years that was much longer than your strategic framework. You agree?
Absolutely. And it fed into the strategic framework, very much. So everything kind of came together so that when we got ready to finalize the strategic framework, it was really clear. What we needed to do is really clear. Our 5-year plan fits on one PowerPoint slide so that we can look at it regularly, be really focused on what it is we need to do, and make sure we stay on course to get all the work done.
Wow.
Now, we don't think we're going to solve all these problems in 5 years, but
Sure.
the 5-year plan is basically a starting point for us.
And what a start it seems like you all have had. That's amazing. I think one other amazing thing that most people don't know is that you're also a musician.
I don't actually consider myself a musician now, but I used to play clarinet, and I have an undergrad degree and a master's degree in clarinet performance, and I have a master's degree in musicology. And I developed TMJ syndrome, a jaw problem, and had to give up playing clarinet, which is what led me into public radio. But I loved, music, and I loved being a music major, and I loved, playing particularly in ensembles. And when I was looking for a career, I was looking for something that would allow me to use my music knowledge.
So outside of classical music, what type of music do you like to listen to?
I like a lot of different kinds of music. I like rock and roll.
Okay.
I always have been a rock and roller since I was a kid.
All right.
I like country music, but I like older country music more than contemporary country music. I like bluegrass. I like jazz. I really like a lot of different genres of music. I just like music in general.
Okay.
And, I love listening to new kinds of music and, exploring. I listen to the music that my nieces and nephews and grandkids listen to, and it's fun.
Cool.
Fun to explore.
So if you could invite any famous musician here to King FM for a tour, who would it be?
Living or dead?
Whichever. Living first. Who would it be? And it does not have to be somebody classical.
Yes. It's a hard question because really there's so many. There's so many people I'd love to meet. But, and I have had an opportunity to meet, some people who were definitely on my bucket list. But I think in terms of living musicians, who would I bring in? Well, let me go to dead first.
All right,
because
go to dead.
I would definitely love to meet Freddie Mercury. Love Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the greatest singers of all time of any genre. So
Any.
I would totally, bring
Classical
in
music background.
really interesting person.
Yeah.
Cried the day that I heard he died, because I was so bummed. And in terms of living, if I was going to think about rock and roll, I'd probably bring in Pete Townsend because The Who has been my favorite rock band for pretty much my whole life.
Okay.
And I'd love to meet him and talk to him, and he's also another great musician.
So if they came here to King FM, a classical music radio station, what would you say to them? How would you introduce classical music from your point of view to Freddie Mercury and then also to the Who?
To Pete Townsend, they
Freddie.
both know music pretty well, so I wouldn't really have to introduce it to them so much. But if I was introducing it to somebody who really didn't know that much about classical music, what I would say is classical music isn't what you think. You may have a vision in your head of men in powdered wigs who, were very prim and proper, but it's not true. I was talking to someone in an earlier meeting today who said, I don't really know that much about classical music, but I saw this documentary about Mozart, and I found out that family loved potty humor, which they did. And she said it just completely changed my idea of who Mozart was. To know that, the scatological jokes were what they did in their family all the time. And they signed all their letters with, potty humor, various things like that. It was like it made him a different person. And I said, and that's who he was.
Yeah.
Totally who he was. He was a character.
Yeah.
Totally a character.
I mean, would you want Mozart in here?
Oh, yeah. I'd love to meet Mozart. Absolutely. Without a question.
Well, the one thing that we do know about him is he couldn't keep a job. So what if he came in here trying to get a job? Would you hire him?
I think I'd be fine with working with Mozart because I like the highly creative, fun, quirky characters. And I usually, I appreciate quirks and I value that in people. So I would look to make Mozart an announcer for sure.
That would be interesting. Well, thank you so much. Man, just a lot of gems that you just gave all of us today. Thank you so much for coming in and being on the show. I really appreciate being here at King FM and having the opportunity to share this wonderful music by all of these people of color who are both composers and performers. It's been such a delight to be here, and I just appreciate the opportunity that you've given me and, of course, given to our entire community. So thank you.
Well, it's my honor to be here, and from the moment you stepped into the station, the whole staff felt like you were part of the family, and you are, and we hope you always will be. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for the incredible work that you're doing, opening the minds and hearts of our listeners to a lot of great music they've never heard before.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special episode of Unmute the Voices. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I encourage you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Dr. Quentin Morris, and until next time, have a great day.